That's good. So let's just get into business straight away, into the meditation practice. So get yourself into a nice posture and let's get started. Okay, so just to get us started tonight, meditation is really such a very simple thing to do. Be careful not to complicate it too much, because it is really almost like the easiest thing in the world. Easier than sleeping, easier than breathing, almost easier than anything else we can possibly think of. And ideally, meditation is just about sitting down and allowing things to be patient and kind in the present moment. That is really what it's all about. And if you can do that, then meditation tends to happen all by itself. But sometimes people find it hard just to sit back and allow things to be. So to enable the process to happen, sometimes it is useful just to focus on the body a little bit. By focusing on the body, sending some kindness to the body, and allowing the body to relax. You're also allowing yourself to be mindful and relaxing at the same time. please have no expectations in your meditation practice. Instead of focusing on the results and where you are going, always focus on the causes of the practice. And the causes are things like kindness and ease. So be kind towards yourself. And as you sit here, if you feel some tensions anywhere in the body, have a sense of kindness towards that. Wish yourself well. May I be at ease. May I be happy. And when you have no expectations in your meditation, it means that you're not going anywhere. It's almost as if there is no future. And when there is no future, it brings you back to the present moment instead. And you care for that present moment. And as you care for the present moment becomes beautiful. And then the mindfulness starts to become more powerful. What a wonderful thing it is to be able to just to sit down and do absolutely nothing, with a sense of rest, of having no goals, no purpose whatsoever, just resting and being grateful in the present moment. What a wonderful thing it is to have a Buddhist society like this, where people can come and find a kind of sanctuary from the world, and just enjoy the good company, the good atmosphere of the company that this brings. What a wonderful thing that is. And have this sense of gratitude in your heart as you develop the mindfulness, and this enforces it even more. Meditation practice is a bit like the art of being without doing. And just feel the power of just being without doing. Feel the sense of release from stress and problems. Feel the sense of clarity. Feel the sense of the power of the mind that arises from being still and not doing anything. It's such a beautiful thing. And always notice the beautiful aspects of the meditation practice. And now turn your attention to all the people around you here today, and wish everyone here well. Thank you for being my spiritual companion. Thank you for coming here and bringing some light to the world. Thank you so much for being on this path together with me. I wish you happiness. I wish you well. And now we are coming towards the very end of the meditation. Before we come to the end, ask yourself, how do you feel now? And if you feel more at ease and more relaxed, ask yourself why that is the case. How does this process of meditation actually work? Okay, so that's the end of the meditation for tonight.